Back in 2020, when Idaho became the first state to ban transgender girls and women from playing on teams for which they identify, there was a question of whether that was even a thing here in Idaho. Well, it was, as evidenced by the subsequent lawsuit filed that April by a transgender woman who wanted to run on the Boise State cross-country team. There's currently an injunction against the Fairness in Women's Sports Act from being enforced while the lawsuit plays out here in Idaho. But that doesn't mean the law hasn't cast its shadow. There was the double down by Idaho's governor last month when he signed an executive order to combat the Biden administration's interpretation of Title IX, which includes protections for transgender athletes. He did it right there on the State House steps, standing right beside Riley Gaines. And then last week, when Boise State forfeited its women's volleyball game against San Jose State University, allegedly because the Spartans have a transgender woman on their team. Allegedly, since BSU didn't explain why it was forfeiting the match. They only went on to say that, well, just that they will not play the game against San Jose State in California on Saturday. And per Mountain West Conference policy, that match will be recorded as a conference loss for the Broncos. No other comment or explanation was offered. It was about that time, on Friday, we learned there was some history of forfeiture and a lot more to this story. According to Outkick, a website created by the Heritage Foundation, in 2022, San Jose State enrolled a transfer player from Coastal Carolina. Blair Fleming, a 6'1" outside hitter, came to the Bay Area school from South Carolina shortly after the Palmetto State passed its own trans athlete ban. In March of 2024, Riley Gaines, mentioned before, the collegiate swimmer who lost a race to a transgender athlete, joined 15 other athletes in a lawsuit against the NCAA for allowing transgender women to compete against cisgender women. Well, that lawsuit has been supported by the Independent Council on Women's Sports, or ICONS as they call themselves. Anyway, about a month later, Redux, an online publication that prides itself on reporting about pedophiles of all things, outed Blair Fleming as transgender. The day that story dropped, on April 17th, Blair told her teammate and sometimes travel roommate, Brooke Slusser, she did in fact identify as a transgender woman. Of course, this is according to Brooke Slusser's amendment to that lawsuit, the ICONS lawsuit and the Riley Gaines lawsuit, which she filed on September 23rd. That was about a week ago, saying she never knew and should have been told Fleming was transgender. But about a week before that, Southern Utah University forfeited its match against San Jose State without saying why. Then on September 24th, ICONS sent a letter to all Mountain West Conference schools presidents saying they're violating federal law and they should find Fleming ineligible to play. 3 days later, Boise State backs out of its match against San Jose State. And of course, you've seen all of the social media coverage, both good and bad, that Boise State has received, even a shout out from the governor saying they are protecting women's sports. Well, in the middle of all that, there's a Middleton mom who got herself involved. April Cheney has a daughter who plays volleyball at another Mountain West Conference school. And on September 22nd, the day before the ICONS letter was sent to conference schools, April penned a letter to the same school presidents because, as she told us today, she wanted to defend her daughter's place in the game. And we had several questions, but the answer to our first kind of gives you an idea of where April is coming from. We asked her if a transgender woman, who is a woman, wants to play sports with other women, isn't the only option for her to play on the women's team?
A transgender athlete who is biologically male is not a woman, and that's just words. They're not a woman because they don't have a uterus and they don't get a period. It's basic biology. They're not a woman. They're not.
And what are your concerns?
The concerns are safety, number one, especially in volleyball, because the net difference is different. It's men's volleyball versus women's volleyball. There is a difference in height, and the reason why, because men are biologically made bigger, stronger, and faster. So that ball's coming over the net stronger, faster.
Fleming. So Blair is 6'1".
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There are other women on the team that are that tall. So is there much of an advantage there?
Yes, because a biological male can jump higher and can hit harder.
Blair has played on San Jose State's team. This will be her third year. The first 2 years, there didn't seem to be a concern or a problem, correct?
Fleming had not come out as stating that he was a male. It was unknown. There was no transparency.
If there was no problem and nobody raised any concerns, but then she comes out as transgender. Can you see how that might seem a little transphobic?
I wasn't involved then. I'm involved now, so I'm speaking on today. Today I am involved, and I know. So I have to speak on what I know right now.
And you wrote a letter.
Yes, I did.
Her letter, dated September 22nd, April said she sent to all university presidents in the Mountain West Conference. And in it, she emphasized safety and fairness. She also asked schools to boycott matches against the Spartans.
And I heard nothing back.
Do you know anybody else who has written letters like this? Parents that have wanted to, or have written letters?
I get a lot of support for what I'm doing because this is really out of my wheelhouse, speaking up like this. It's very unusual. So they all support me and they're cheering for me, but they're afraid. They are afraid to speak out.
How do you know this?
They've told me.
What have they said?
Well, they're afraid that they're going to be viewed as transphobic or hateful. They're afraid of losing their jobs for speaking up. They're afraid of their female student athlete losing their spot. So I get it, and I respect the place that they're at right now, but we need more people speaking up. We need players, we need fans, and we need parents.
What do you want to see happen?
I would like to see the NCAA separate collegiate sports by biological sex and protect the female category.
No gray area.
There's no gray area. We are born either a male or a female. And I'm not too sure how we got to this gray area in sports because sports have always been separated by sex. There's always been separation in sports to make it fair.
There was a time when sports were separated by race and color too.
Mm-hmm. That is true. But again, I'm going back to the most basic separation, biological sex. It shouldn't be complicated.
You mentioned risk. Other parents don't want to risk.
Mm-hmm.
You've risked a little bit.
I've risked a lot, yeah.
How so?
My daughter has asked me not to speak about this. She asked me twice and begged me a third time. She doesn't want this drama on her team. She doesn't want to deal with this, and she never asked for this attention, and I never wanted that for her, but as of right now, she's really upset with me.
How upset? Not
talking to me. And I told her when she asked me each time, I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. This issue is bigger than you. It's bigger than your team. It's bigger than your conference. It's women's sports on the line here. And I'm just hoping that the foundation we have built, that she'll see this and understand why.
April says the risk of not speaking to her daughter again over this issue is worth it. Says she's hoping she's not the only one speaking up, though, about this issue. She told us this isn't something players or coaches should have to deal with. It should have already been handled higher up, she says, thus her letter to the school presidents. Other than to say members will continue to promote Title IX and ensure fair competition, the NCAA has not responded to our request for comment. The Mountain West, well, they just deferred to what Boise State put out on Friday, which we saw wasn't much, which is probably the biggest problem in all of this. Nobody's really saying anything about it. Nobody's coming to the table to talk about it and put these issues forth and come up with a solution. And what is that solution? For teams to just continue to forfeit? Boise State, by the way, is now 0-2 in conference with a game against Air Force coming up this week. So what happens when San Jose State plays Colorado State on Thursday night? Do the Rams forfeit, or do they play on and then boost their conference standings? Or possibly lose their conference standing? And what happens when San Jose State comes into Boise, which they're scheduled to do on November 21st?